Hi everyone, welcome to the Mind Over Chatter podcast, where Central Michigan University counselors discuss topics centered around the life of a CMU student, discover skills and strategies to navigate life's challenges, and thrive as a CMU student. I am your host, Kyleigh Ayala, and with me today I have Julie Fortino Shurtliff and Cheryl Danner. Before we jump into the episode, I want to take a minute for both of you to introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Julie Fortino Shurtliff. I've been a counselor at the Counseling Center for 3 years, and I just want to let you know that I run a group, and it's called the Relaxation Hour. So it's a way to end your week with relaxation and self-care. We begin each hour with some grounding exercises. We do some gentle stretching, and we end with a guided meditation. So it's really just a way to get relaxed after your week. So I hope to see you there. It's Fridays at 11 in Faust 135.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Danner. I too am at the Counseling Center. I'm a part-time counselor. I work on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and I do not run a group like Julie, but I'm super excited to be here to do the podcast with y'all.
Thank you both for being here with us today. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about the different types of stress and how it can impact daily functioning, because believe it or not, there are such things as good and bad stress. Throughout this episode, we are going to break down the different types of stress, how to identify them, and ways to navigate them. The different types of stress that we will be focusing on today are good stress, called eustress, and bad stress, called distress. But before we get there, let's start from the beginning. In order to do so, we have to be able to identify and recognize the difference between stressors and stress. So I open this up to our co-hosts. What are the differences between stressors and stress?
Stressors are the external experiences that trigger or put pressure on our system. Stressors can include, but aren't limited to, having a really heavy workload, loneliness, that transition from high school to college, having to make a decision about what kind of career you want, financial concerns, peer pressure, conflicts with your roommates. All of these can be, stressors that we have to deal with in college life. In contrast to stressors, stress is the internal reaction to the perceived triggers, like what happens in our body when we have to deal with those stressors that we encounter.
With stress being an internal reaction, what are some ways that this might show up for people?
Well, when I think about it, just even doing this podcast, like I'm nervous, I might laugh, like a nervous laugh. My body might get a little tense. I might start speaking more quickly. Those are just some things that might happen in my body when I'm feeling stress.
Sure. And I think you can also think of it like there's a physiological reaction to stress. So maybe you'll get a stomach ache or a headache, or, your neck will get tense, and you can also think of it too as like the story that you start telling yourself. If you get really stressed, you might start telling a story of, I can't do this, or, thoughts can become kind of negative, or your perception of the world, it might seem kind of scary, or, you could shut down.
So kind of like that rumination, catastrophizing of thoughts.
Right.
And the way Julie might experience stress and the way I might experience stress could be completely different. So everybody experiences it differently.
And that leads us into our next topic of discussion, how stress can be viewed or experienced differently by different people. So an analogy is, imagine an abstract picture. Two people can look at the same image and see different things or focus on different things. How does this relate to stress? And it might be between, two different people, but it might also be with an individual at two different points in time, or two different moods, two different feelings, experiences that are going on in the reality.
Okay, I think we can think about this by thinking about two different students who are both heading in for the same chemistry exam. One student comes in very prepared for the exam. They've done a lot of studying. They're feeling prepared to take the exam. The stress for that person is going to wake them up. It's going to give them energy. It's going to actually maybe help them focus. It's going to give them what they need to be able to be successful on that exam. Person two didn't prepare. They don't at all feel prepared for the exam. So they come in, the stress is going to overwhelm. It can really affect people's ability to concentrate. It can affect your ability to remember things. So same situation, two different types of stress, and how it can affect you.
You make a great point, Julie. Two people in the same set of circumstances, but they're experiencing stress in a very, very different way.
The different reactions based on the state an individual is in makes me think of the polyvagal theory.
Yeah, so the polyvagal theory is a scientific theory that really explains the vagus nerve and how it regulates our emotional social connections, and fear responses. So the human body is really a beautifully designed instrument, and our nervous system is really helping us determine safety in any given situation. So, this theory basically talks about how there's three different states. Ventral vagal, which is the state of safety and connection. When you're in that state of mind, you're feeling calm, safe, socially engaged. Maybe you're hanging out with friends or just feeling in the zone. The next state is sympathetic state. So this is kind of fight or flight. Maybe something happens, you get an email from your professor that, your grade didn't come out right, you failed your first quiz, you get activated kind of in that moment, just imagining stress or danger, feelings of anxiety, maybe before a test or you're running late. You might be anxious, angry, but also alert. This state gives you a lot of energy. The stories you might be telling yourself in this state is I'm in danger, I need to protect myself. Not feeling safe necessarily. The last state is the dorsal vagal. It's a kind of a state of shutdown or freeze. So you hear fight, flight, or freeze. This is the state of being frozen. It's normally activated in kind of extreme danger situations or just when you're feeling hopeless. You might feel numb, disconnected, overwhelmed. This could be a state where you're telling your things like, I'm hopeless, nothing's going to get better, nobody cares. It's really the state of disconnection. And really, depending on what state you're in, it's going to drive the stories you're telling yourself in your head. I think that's an interesting thing to think about when it comes to stress.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned like the three different states. And I'm thinking as a means to simplify it further down for our listeners, is there a certain state that I tend to be in more? Is there a certain state that I tend to be in less? Do I fluctuate between the three or am I kind of stable?
Yeah, and I think we're meant to fluctuate. This system isn't broken. I mean, this system works perfectly, and it's meant to work for you to be able to fluctuate. So when there is a crisis situation, you don't want to be in a relaxed state. You need to be in fight or flight. You need to have your adrenaline pumping and you need to be ready to run.
Absolutely. You think you want to be calm, cool, and collected all the time, but actually, you need your body to do what it's doing. It needs to be able to react quickly and send more blood to your extremities to run from the bear or whatever you're encountering. I mean, you just can't be calm all the time. So there's a reason it works the way it does.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to use the bear analogy too of like, if we're in danger, if our body feels that we're in danger, it's going to decrease some of our other functionings like the digestive system, the reproductive system. I don't know, Julie, if you have any other that you can think of off the top of your head, but your main purpose and the main goal of your body in that moment is get me someplace safe away from this danger.
For sure. And even your attention will become more focused. You're not going to be paying attention to as much. Your focus is going to be a lot smaller. You're focused on the problem, solving the problem, getting yourself out of the situation. So even your ability to concentrate or remember, it affects a lot of different things. And I think really the point of it is just awareness. So sometimes we get triggered into the sympathetic state, the fight or flight, when there really isn't any danger. So we just need to be able to be aware of where we're at. And then there are ways, that you can regulate your nervous system to become more calm if you do get triggered.
We use different techniques like deep breathing or maybe talking to a friend or a supportive person or something to try to maybe get us out of that fight or flight stage we're in, to try to calm ourselves and get more grounded.
What are some statements that people can use to kind of regulate themselves, whether that's I am safe, I am not in danger? Is that a thing, or is it more so of those grounding breathing techniques?
I think the beauty of humans is there's no fix, one fix for anything. So each person's going to be a little bit different. And so I think it's kind of the part about getting to know yourself and just trying different things and seeing what works for you.
And I think practicing breathing techniques and other tools that we might have in our toolkit to deal with these intense emotions and feelings.
And I think a lot of times when you're in a fight or flight or even shut down or freeze state, the one thing that we do always have access to is our breath. And that will help. I mean, when you get in these triggered kind of states, your heart will start pumping, your body will get filled with adrenaline. The one thing that's going to slow all of that down is breath. So if you can get connected to your breath and really slow your breathing down, it'll slow your heart rate down and then kind of slow that whole flood of chemicals down.
Mm-hmm. So we have box breathing, we have 4-7-8 breathing, which I think those are the two most common. I'm not sure if you guys have any other ones.
Those are the two I try to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think in that moment, if you can, if counting is a thing that you don't want to do, you can always just, as long as your exhale is longer than your inhale, that's the key. That kind of tells your body that all is well. You don't need to be in a fight or flight state.
You don't need to be fighting for your life sitting in algebra class.
Correct. That's not, although it may feel that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not the truth.
And so I think because we threw a lot at you with this question. So I'm wondering too, if using the ladder analogy of being able to view these things. So at the top of the ladder, that's your ventral vagal system. In the middle of your ladder, that's your sympathetic state. At the very bottom of your ladder is your dorsal state.
And the dorsal state is the one that probably causes us the most concern, because if we get stuck in that for too long, then we don't have the energy to, deal with the day-to-day stressors that come with college life.
Now that we know the different distinctions between stressors and stress, let's get into the different types of stress, the good and the bad.
Well, I'll go ahead and give some examples of good stress. We never think there's such thing as good stress, but there really is. Think of and we call it eustress, but think of a athlete that's going into a football game or a track meet or something, and they feel some stress. They're excited, they want to perform well, and it's getting them focused so they can concentrate and perform at their peak ability level. So that's a really good stress that helps us perform.
Yeah, and I think we can think of distress as being overwhelmed. It's really going to impair your ability to concentrate. Emotions can arise, irritability, frustration, sadness, anger. All of these things can feel really intense. When you're at a place where it's too much.
And we just have to accept stress is going to be in our life, especially when we're in college. I mean, we are going to encounter stress, and how we learn to regulate and navigate it is key.
Yeah, and I think something to consider too is there's no avoiding it. I think a lot of people get really stressed, and so they're like, oh, it's too stressful. I can't do that. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to avoid it. That's not going to fix the problem, because then you're going to start avoiding more and more, and your world's going to start getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If if walking through the library is stressful, that's okay. Do it anyway. It's good practice. It's not something to be avoided. It's something that the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Like exposure therapy.
Absolutely. Thinking about like the nervousness you might feel going to talk to a professor the first time. But if you do it on a regular basis and go to office hours and whatnot, it becomes easier. And before you know it, you can do it with ease. And we need to accept stress is unavoidable. The more we do it, the easier it is. Think about visiting a professor's office. That first time is going to be scary. You're going to be nervous. That sympathetic system is going to be activated. But if you do it several times and feel comfortable with the professor, it gets easier and easier.
That makes me think about what we talked about earlier about the catastrophizing and the rumination of how many times do we work ourselves up with our thoughts that it becomes an internal, like we talked about, like the polyvagal, a nervous system thing. Like we're so anxious and it's like, well, I'm not going to do it anyway. But it's like you have all of these thoughts, all of these what if scenarios. It's like, but how do we know that that's going to happen? Like you don't know until you're putting yourself into this state of nervousness, the sympathetic state, maybe for no reason.
Actually, you're right. I mean, think of how many times you've avoided and didn't think you could handle something, and you get in there and it was easy. And you're like, why did I worry so much about that?
We know that there are a lot of negativity surrounding the idea of stress. Stress is uncomfortable, rightfully so, but it is a natural response that is needed to navigate life. And as college students, even as human beings in general, like we're going to continue to evolve, grow, adapt to our situations and our circumstances, and stress is just a natural part of that.
You're right. It's completely unavoidable. College is stressful. I mean, as counselors, we know and expect students to be stressed. You're leaving your family's home for the first time and making all of these decisions and adulting. And we haven't done it before. So it's going to be stressful, and we need to learn how to navigate that.
And I like how you mentioned, like, we as counselors know that, but I also think that a lot of the university staff know that as well. Like, your professors are, like, they've been in your shoes, they know that you're stressed.
You're
Everybody
right.
that's
They've
been
been doing it for years.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But we think we're the first people to encounter and experience it.
Yeah, and I think just talking about how stress is uncomfortable, it really makes me think about the comfort zone versus the growth zone. College is a time when you're going to grow a lot. And so just knowing that you need to find a place where you can be in your comfort zone. You can't be in the growth zone all the time because it is, like we talked about with the polybagel theory and the sympathetic mode
State, yeah.
state.
State mode.
You can't be there all the time. You need to have a time to relax, to kind of recharge, be comfortable, but also to know that growth, it's called growing pains for a reason. It's not comfortable, and that's okay. It's a place where you're going to challenge yourself, you're going to do new things, you're going to meet a lot of new people. And so just knowing that that's just kind of a natural part of college.
Yeah, it's
And-
scary, but I mean, that's how we grow. I mean, just think of where we start as 18-year-olds, and then we graduate, a few years later, and we're starting our career. We need these stressors and challenges to prepare us for the real world.
Mhm. So necessary.
Mhm.
And it also makes me think of that saying, although it's cliche, like, nothing changes if nothing changes. So if you're constantly in your comfort zone, nothing's going to change. We talked about a lot today. We threw a lot at you, and now we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use to navigate or handle stressful moments or experiences.
We already talked a little bit about breathing and the different types of breathing activities we can do to kind of slow us down, reduce our blood flow and calm our nervous system. Besides just breathing, I think of a lot of students wanting to tune in and listen to their music, and it just calms you down very quickly. Or exercise, that's another huge one that kind of alleviates a lot of that internal tension, and we get some of that negative energy out of our systems.
Yeah, and I always like to help clients identify things that have worked for them in the past. So this is not the first time you're ever encountering stress. So if you can think maybe back to a time when you were stressed, if there were things that you did then that worked, now is a great time to bring those out. So maybe you were a journaler, and that really helped just to kind of write things down and get it out of your mind. Maybe you're somebody who likes to call a friend and, chit chat for a while just to get your mind off of things. Or maybe you have a favorite comfort show on Netflix that you like to turn on and just chill out, wrap up in a blankie on the couch and watch your show. So there's lots of different ways that you can just relax.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes I feel like there's this negative connotation surrounding journaling in terms of people like, well, I don't like to write. And so an opposing side to that is opening up your notes app and jotting some things down. And also I have told students to keep like a video diary of like, set your camera up and just like take videos, or even like with your phone, you have the audio feature of it. So you can just like record voice notes. And so it kind of gives the same feeling in the idea of I'm putting thoughts onto paper, but it's not actual pen and paper.
Yes, a lot of people say they're not good at journaling and stuff, but there's different ways to kind of get the thoughts out than just pen and paper.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about how stress is unavoidable and how we need to navigate and manage it. But the truth of the matter, there are times that the stress becomes overwhelming and we are just flooded with negative feelings, negative thoughts that kind of make us feel debilitated. Yeah, we just don't have the energy to get up to go to class, to wake up, to shower, to get ourselves, ready for that exam, to study properly. And maybe it's during these times where we do feel depleted and at a loss and feeling hopeless and helpless that we might need some assistance from someone like us in the counseling center. We're here to support and help give you those tools to get through the difficult times.
That's a wrap on the Mind Over Chatter podcast. To our listeners, we are glad you joined us. To our guest, thank you for your time and expertise. Stay up to date on all things Counseling Center related. Follow us on Instagram at CMU Counseling. Check out the Counseling Center website, council.cmich.edu. For counseling services, CMU students can call 989-774-3381 or request an appointment on our website. For other Mind Over Chatter podcast episodes, visit the Mind Over Chatter podcast tab on the Counseling Center website. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.